Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming. I know already so many of you. It's very reassuring for me after, I don't know since when I'm visiting Spain on a more regular basis for business reasons, as you will understand during my presentation, but it seems to work and it's paying off since I start knowing many of you. So for those who don't know me, I'm Philippe Monteyne from Fund Plus, a Belgian fund. So first I need to thank the organizers for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to tell you a bit more about what we do as a fund, as a VC based in Belgium. I'll tell you about that. I also use my personal experience, of course, and as you will see, my personal experience is more coming from the pharma industry. I've been in executive positions in R&D in GlaxoSmithKline and Sanofi, different parts of their organizations before moving to the field of biotech. And on top of that, it's a very important day for me today, and especially for Fund Plus and Spain and the biotech scene in Spain. So some of you know why I'm saying that. Those who don't know, please stay with us, and you will see, because it's coming later in my presentation. I adapted it just this morning because to stick with what is new for us today. So basically what I wanted to do is, well, starting from very basic things. I will not bother you with very theoretical aspects, but just to tell you a little bit what we do. So at Fund Plus, as I will I'll say more about it a bit later in the presentation, but basically we are a VC fund created something like 3 years ago in 2015, so it's rather new. We are not very visible yet. Although we are growing, as you will see. And our focus, and that was a decision from the beginning, our focus is around the Series A investments, and in terms of development, or stage development, as we are mainly focusing on therapeutic approaches, it means we are focusing on late preclinical, early clinical development. So that's really our focus. We are agnostic on the different disease areas, and we believe that this is what can be called the valley of death. Usually you can more or less easily, depending on the countries, we can talk about that later, you can more or less easily find initial funds to start at the university and grants, and then you have the family and friends and all that, but there is a time when you need to grow, and before you really attract the big ones, there is somewhere in between a very important role, we believe, for the classical VCs, and some of you in the room are playing their role and working exactly in the same environment as we do. So this is another representation. I like that. Again, I will not bother you with theoretical considerations about the development of companies, but there is one message there which I think is very interesting to pass when, and I'm talking also to my colleagues investors here, I think that's something we need to present to those who build their startups and who are founders of companies. Most of the time, they have difficulties to accept that at some point we come with capital, with equity in the capital, and we become shareholders, and by definition, they are diluted. But that's how we will make their business grow. And so the message, as you can see there, for a founder, it's something difficult. Some of them don't realize that they need to go through that stage and that they don't necessarily see the benefit of what VCs can bring and what that sort of shareholdership can bring to make the company growing. But as the slide says, 100% of nothing is a lot less than something, whether it's 17%, like in this example, of anything of a big company. And I think that's something that we are facing on a very regular basis. And also for those who would be CEOs of startups in the room, I think it's very important to understand that, yes, you can be diluted, but it's very important to take investments in terms of in equity, and also to look for that kind of investments, because I hope we can not only bring you to the next step with money, but also with we can also help the startup companies grow with our experience, and that's what we try to do. I've been, as I told you, I've been in executive positions in R&D in different big pharma, At GSK, I've been head of global vaccine development, and then also with GSK, I've been head of R&D for rare diseases at some point, and more recently, I've been head of R&D France with Sanofi. Very large organizations where what we do actually is to manage a portfolio which goes from discovery up to the launch of the products. And typically the way we look at the products and at the probability of success is what you can see on that slide, is that you need to have about 30 projects in discovery to have one succeeding. So that's the classical, I have some former friends from GSK in the room. I see at least two of them. And for some certainly others from other companies know what we are talking about. So it's really when your discovery teams come with a new asset that you want to progress, that you decide to progress, you know that basically you have 3% chances that it will go up to the end and be ultimately a drug on the market. What we do at our level at Fund Plus, but it's the same for other investors in the room, I guess, is we have selected that window, which is around late preclinical, early clinical development. And so by doing that, rather than moving from 30 projects to one up to registration, we go from 20 to 2, basically. You have about you see 19.4 in that example in phase 1, and you have 2 which will go in phase 3. So rather than going from 30 to 1, we go from 20 late preclinical up to 2, that would enter in phase 3, because for us the success stops there. We don't believe that we are able to finance, of course, beyond phase 2, except in rare diseases, and we can talk about that later. But all of that, our success is when the company is taken over either by an acquisition or goes for an exit, an IPO, and continues to find other ways to fund itself. But basically, we succeed when we have a successful entry in phase 3, more or less. So which means that's the kind of ratio that we are looking for, from 20 to 2 molecules. And you also know, and that's where I want to tell you how much I believe that we can influence the whole world of drug development, actually, at the biotech level. And I really believe that it is at the biotech level now, within the biotech world, that we build the future of medicine and the future of drug development. And I know, having been myself a head of R&D, that it is really becoming tough to succeed with R&D, to have a successful R&D in bigger pharma organizations. If you look over time, what happens is that the number of medical entities per million or billions of dollars spent is decreasing dramatically over time. And that's a reality. And that's why there was a time where we were saying that in the big pharma, we classically consider that it would cost 1 billion euros to develop one medicine. No, it's much more than that, if you take into account the attrition, of course. Which means that the big pharma actually really rely on the biotech. And I want to show you one example. So, of course, it's one that I know well, and I will not disclose anything confidential. It's not needed, and I wouldn't do it, of course. But basically, that's an example that I like to show for different reasons, because first, it's a very good illustration of what I'm saying, how much the biotech contributes to the success of the big pharma, but also because everything is in the website. So with Sanofi, like with other companies, you can look at their website and you can look at their portfolio, and that's what you would find. So this is a very recent slide taken from the Sanofi website. And what you see is that it's a very rich pipeline at all stages, very well balanced across the different disease areas and all that. So it's I think for the analyst, it's quite a nice one, and certainly very promising. But then you should look at the footnotes. That's the circles that I've put on the slides. If you look at the footnotes, they are very small, like always, and you would see one is Regeneron, one is Regulus, one is Sangamo, and a few others, not specified, says partnered and or in collaboration. If you start looking at all these footnotes, what you will realize is that most of the pipeline actually is coming from biotech companies. and that the internal discovery, and that's, I can tell you about that, also without disclosing anything confidential. When I was leading the R&D France for Sanofi, it was a 6,000 people organization, so a very big one. I can tell you the productivity of the internal R&D in terms of discovery is very limited vis-a-vis what you get from the external world, i.e. from the biotech world. And that's the message, I guess. And then even if you look at the different divisions, which are the ones on the right, you would see that rare diseases and multiple sclerosis and neurology are coming from where? From Genzyme, which was acquired for $20 billion by Sanofi a few years ago. The rare blood disorders are coming from Bioverativ, another company acquired earlier this year. And then the vaccine is a bit special because vaccine business, with Sanofi, it's Sanofi Pasteur. Within GSK, it's GSK Vaccines. In each case, and that's also in the public domain, they invest by definition more or less 50% of their R&D budget in external collaboration. So I guess the message is very clear. If you dissect a little bit, and you could do the exercise with any other big pharma, based on what is in the public domain, you will easily find how much we can contribute. I say we because we all work in the biotech, in the world of biotech companies, how much we can contribute to the success of the pharma industry ultimately. And I think that's a key role we have to play. Now, just a few words therefore about Fund Plus. So it has been created 3 years ago, as I said, under the sponsorship of Professor Désiré Collen, who is a very famous retired Belgian professor, famous because he's the one who discovered the TPA, tissue plasmid chain activator, that has been used for many, many years in cardiovascular disorders and still is still used in thrombolysis. And so that was in the year 70s, a very nice time when the professors of universities were making invention on their own and not on behalf of their university. And he had a very nice idea to just patent his invention just on time to then out-license to Genentech. And you can imagine how many tens of millions of euros it made over the years in terms of royalties coming from Genentech. So he has been very successful, and at the end of his career, he's now retired. He's 75 years old, but he wanted to support the creation of something in the field of investment. So he supported us to create with 3 other partners. Actually, we created this fund, which is focusing initially on Belgium. So it's only Belgian money initially, 30% of public money and 70% of private origin. And basically, we are an evergreen fund. The plus in Fund Plus means that behind that, we want to have a societal impact, both in Belgium but also in other countries where we'll start. We started 3 years ago. On the slide, you have the 4 partners, Paul Magret, Jan van den Bosch, myself, and then Chris Boyce. In the middle, you have our assistant, and Désiré Collen is the retired professor on the right. So that's how we started. Very small team, just 4 partners, 2 medics and 2 with a financial background. Paul, unfortunately for us, already retired himself. So we are 3 partners for the moment, but he will be replaced soon. And we rapidly actually raised 125 million euros. Just to give you a little bit about the history, we were targeting 100 million. We thought we were completely, what is interesting is that none of us has done that job before. But we are all coming from the field. So the other medic has been the CEO of a series of companies, including, you may know about Innogenetics in Belgium or other companies. Myself, I told you about what I've done. The others are, one has been an analyst with a bank following the biotech companies, another one has been a CFO. So we are coming from the field, and that was appealing to our own shareholders. And we also thought that 100 million sounds good. To be serious on the European level, well, we raised 125, and then we made one major exit in the meantime, after only 2 years. You may have heard about that one. It's Ojeda, It's a company that we brought up to phase 2A, so it was even not yet phase 3 ready in women's health, in a medic for menopausal hot flashes. And at the end of phase 2A, we sold it for 800 million euros to Astellas in Japan. 500 upfront, 300 in milestones. And with that, we doubled the size of our fund. So we are now a 200 million euros fund. So it started actually very rapidly with a major success, which is good and not good. It's not good because we put the bar very high for shareholders, but it's good, of course, because although we are not yet very visible, as I said, we are already now at a level which makes it serious amongst other VCs. Like all, we have our own investment criteria. I will not go through the whole list. It is even outdated because that was the initial, we didn't change actually. These were the initial investment criteria where we were targeting 100 to 125 million euros, which means that we wanted to have something like 15 companies in the portfolio, and that's still the case. We just increase a little bit the ticket these days. For us, you see the main topics, it's the company, the area, people, and project. The companies, what is important for us is that they need, because our shareholders invested in an evergreen fund with a societal impact, so we need to make sure that there is some notion of ethical integrity. There are some of these things are very important for us. So the values of the companies are very important. In terms of stage of development, I told you we want to have some form of proof of concept, late preclinical, very early clinical. And we are in very different fields, but always patient-centric. So we have done only therapeutic drug development so far. We'll definitely would like to be in diagnostics, maybe in medtech, but it needs to be patient-centric, which means that it needs to be directly for the patient, not services that we would sell to pharma companies or that sort of things. The people are very important. That's part of our evaluation. We definitely want to have a strong management team. Doesn't mean that we don't extend the team, the initial team, but we want to work with the team rather than replacing them as much as possible. And that also should reassure the founders, I hope, when we invest somewhere. And the project, these are classical, of course, classical criteria that everybody are looking for. And as an example, and I would be interested to hear from other investors how this compares with what they do, but this is the kind of activities that we have on a regular basis. This was last year, 2017, but this year should look very close to that one, which means that in 1 year we screen something like 100, in that case, 140, 138 projects. Many projects are closed rapidly because they don't fit with all the different criteria, and sometimes you don't need to spend too much of time, but then some are really going for extensive due diligence. Was the case for 9 projects. And we have done last year 3 investments. One, the first one, Prometera, is a company in which we were already, so that was not a new one, but then we invested in a company, Immunic in Germany, Rahama in Paris, and we finally invested just at the end of the year in a new one, ALIN. So it gives you an idea of the number of projects that we see to select finally a few. So, and this year we hope we'll do another 3 new investments probably. And this is the portfolio. So it's, I think, very diversified. There was one at the very beginning, but we didn't stay for long. So this one was more a manufacturing, and we were that for historical reasons. There was one major exit, as I told you, is Ojeda, the one I mentioned that we sold to Astellas. So this for, again, 500 million euros upfront, and we still wait for the milestones to come. And then for the rest, well, it's very diversified. So there are 8 companies today. One is, well, you have a few ones in oncology or in immuno-oncology, like Octimet with c-Met inhibitors, Iteos, which was recently going for Series B, and Eterna. So here, this is a small molecules and monoclonal antibodies, and this is RNA-based. Then you have immunic small molecules in autoimmunity. Then we have cell therapy, which is very well represented in Belgium. This is the ecosystem. The Belgian ecosystem is well represented with cell therapy. Here it's an allogenic approach in liver diseases. This one is an autologous approach in bone and potentially in skin disorders. Then we have, so this is cell therapy. Then we have gene therapy with OHAMA in rare ophthalmology disorders in Paris. And ALIN is a very creative approach with peptides that make proteins aggregate to inhibit some proteins in infectious diseases. So quite a broad portfolio. And now coming to Spain. So I definitely wanted to tell you a bit how I perceive Spain. So I'm using a slide that colleagues from ISIOS kindly shared with me. And I think it's a very good representation of what I think Spain represents in terms of opportunity. And by chance, it is not far from what I've known with France. So as you understand, I've worked in France. I've been trained in France in Pasteur Institute, and then I worked at Sanofi for a while, so I know quite well that environment. And the similarity between France and Spain to some extent is that the science is very good. You have very, very good science. A number of publications are quite impressive. If you look at the national scientific output, so this is Spain just behind France. But then the issue comes when you need to translate that in innovation and to fund the translation of science in innovation and create biotech companies. And that's where Spain is definitely like France, because again, France, well, proportional to the size of the country, France is much lower, but much smaller than others, especially vis-a-vis UK, for instance. And you see Spain is just behind Belgium, while Belgium is, of course, a very small country, and yet we are just above Spain in terms of creating biotech companies, in terms of private investment. So I think that's where the potential opportunity is for us. It's really to say that you have very strong science. It's up to the right players, and I think VCs can do that, certainly help creating value out of the science. And so as far as Spain is concerned, I have the great chance to have already some personal experience in Spain. Well, some of them are in the room, so they will recognize them themselves. So basically, I have the great chance to already be an independent board member of ALX Therapeutics. It's a great company located in Barcelona. The CEO is over there in the room, developing a therapeutic HIV vaccine. I enjoy a lot, so not only thanks to, I think I certainly can use my experience in vaccine development, but also I enjoy a lot working with the right people. Again, it's very strong science. In that case, it's also well funded with, and they are in the room also, J&J Venture with CAISA and ISIOS. And so this was for me a first very good experience to work in Spain and in the Spanish biotech environment. And thanks to that network now, I've also been introduced to a new project. So when I say ongoing evaluations, actually one became a reality this morning. And so for those who haven't seen it yet, we had a great chance to lead a new investment in Minorix in Barcelona, which is today the largest investment in biotech companies this year in Spain. So I think we are very proud of that. So I had also the great chance to be leading the syndicate with Belgian co-investors. And what we definitely want to do is to reinforce the relationship between Spain and Belgium in that case, but not only Belgium. And certainly, we believe that the science in that case is very good. I'll tell you about that in a minute. The science is excellent, but also we believe that we can bring certainly complementary expertise in clinical, regulatory, maybe manufacturing, coordination, that sort of things. And certainly benefit also from the Belgian ecosystem and the relationship with Belgium. So yes, it is a 21 million euro Series B closed yesterday afternoon. So it was just on time to be announced today at BIOSPAIN. And again, it's the largest investment in biotechs in Spain this year. So it's a great journey for us. We are joining the Series A shareholders, some of them in the room with Isios, Caissa, also Kurma from Paris, Roche are there, and others. And so we are coming with, as I said, with a Belgian syndicate on top of the present investors, and they operate, the projects are in rare neurological disorders. The beauty of that in rare diseases is that, as opposed to what I mentioned initially in my presentation, here we can really hope going up to the registration. And so that's why this company is already in phase 2, phase 3 with one indication in AMN, adrenomyelin neuropathy, and we hope we can progressively go into more indications in the same field of rare neurological diseases. And finally, I want to, I think I will end on this interesting thoughts, and you will probably see that things have not completely changed since the time of Voltaire. So, well, this is my French culture, but it's interesting to see what Voltaire was saying at this time about doctors. Doctors are men, sorry, they were men at that time. Doctors are men who prescribe medicines of which they know little, to cure diseases of which they know less, and human beings of whom they know nothing. So I hope we are progressing, but I'm not sure we have completely changed that since that time. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if I take questions, Sonia, or we have time for one or two questions. Otherwise, yeah. And we have a panel just afterwards. I think it's here as well, with some of the people I was mentioning.
No, this is Guillermo Serrano from Checkpoint Partners. You mentioned in your slide that you're looking for a relationship with some sort of with Belgium. Or Belgium ecosystem. Could you kind of expand a little bit of what that means and what you're looking for?
Yeah, sure. So basically, well, first, in the case of Minorix, it's an easy one because they were already working with academic centers in Belgium at the University of Brussels. The contact is already established to evaluate future indications. So that's something that we can certainly promote. And then we have a series of incubators in Belgium, in particular on the French part of the country. There are two incubators. One where we will be, certainly will put the Minorix team in contact with them because they can certainly help finding more resources at the European level in terms of, as I said, clinical, regulatory, manufacturing, that sort of thing. So we will certainly use that. And then there are more opportunities, of course, on the financial side. We have the Euronext, of course, in Brussels. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily the future option for these companies, but it's an option. So certainly available, which is one more thing to consider. And yes, we are in a very strong environment, you know, also thanks to the pharma industry. We have Janssen, UCB, or Janssen's from J&J, UCB, GSK Vaccines, a very big one in Wallonia. So with these companies and many people who are former employees of these companies, it creates a very strong ecosystem, I think.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, you're an evergreen fund. You have increased now your capacity. You said you're increasing the tickets. What's the envisage overall investment per company over the full investment cycle?
So indeed, what we typically do now with the new size of the fund, now that we are around 200 million, we typically invest tickets of 4, 5, 6 million euros, and we keep as much in reserve by definition, which means that when we put that sort of ticket, we virtually have the same in reserve for the future. And that's the way we want to also follow. Now, long-lasting, you know, Ojeda was a very rapid exit as well. So it doesn't mean that we would block, and certainly we will not miss a good opportunity if there are good opportunities, but if a CEO needs to be supported on the longer term, we can do that as well.
So the rate of failure of pharmaceutical programs is much higher than the rate of failure of clinical assets historically, which shows us that drugs fail for a number of reasons that sometimes have nothing to do with their activity or clinical efficacy, especially in biotech. And so we've seen a movement recently, which is the scouting of shelves to create new companies. Now, in your firm, but also perhaps as representative of the European side of venture capital, how do you compare two such examples side to side? So a company with, let's say, a phase 2 ready asset, which was developed in-house, so pure innovation, with something that was just lifted off the shelves of Pfizer and is phase 2 ready with a company around it, all else equal, if there was such a thing. Is there any residual bias when these companies come in front of you? Thank you.
No, well, I think, and we see that sort of opportunities as well. Huh? Some of the big pharma don't necessarily pursue everything, and so you have spin-out companies of larger pharma organizations as well. And but basically, as you understand, based on my experience from the big pharma, I'm a strong believer in what we can do in a biotech company to develop a product. I really believe we can go faster. We can be leaner. It's the bureaucracy has nothing to compare. The decision process is very different. So whether you bring your product from the biotech to the big pharma, or whether you also use or develop products that are not developed by the big pharma but can be for strategic reasons, I think in both cases we can do a lot better. In many cases we can do a lot better and a lot faster. And you will see that more and more. I really believe that the classical model of the big pharma R&D is over. They cannot continue with the kind of probability of success, a low probability of success they have. This model is over. So they need to rely, and that's what you see already. I showed the example of Scientific. They need to rely on us and on the biotech world. And what can be done also is to have biotech companies taking products for development and bringing them back to the big pharma industry. Not necessarily the same big pharma, but that's something we will see more and more as well. Another question? Well, thank you again.